Welcome everyone to Politically High Tech. This is gonna be episode 192. I have an author here who is, I could just safely say, very involved in politics, and there was a pretty interesting intersectionality that actually caught my attention. A lot of people don't connect this two together. There's been a few fluff, superficial studies that I've been taken seriously about how you can predict someone's on the right, about how they get disgusted with interesting images, just to put it nicely, that their, I forget, their left or right amygdala is very active. The fear organ, if you want to be super simple, even though it's kind of misrepresenting it. And then the left, they're more open, and I think the interior cortex. Like I said, I didn't take the study very seriously. That part is a little more developed, that accepts contradicting and weird combination of ideas, as to put it nicely. But yeah, I'm sure we're gonna get deeper and more intellectual than that. That I can promise you, because we have an author who goes pretty deep on this. Okay, it's not from one of those stupid articles that you just read from BuzzFeed. Yes, I'm bashing BuzzFeed. It's a waste of internet space, in my opinion. And I know it's like a right wing when I say it, but it really is. It's a lot of the most low IQ stuff that you see in there. Unless you don't know better, then of course you go there. Just say, hey, don't admit it to me that you love BuzzFeed, okay? Just don't admit it to me. That's okay if you want to avoid a conflict right there. All right, but then before I derail, I have a guest here who is deeply analyzing the modern tribalism of American politics. He already wrote four books, and if my hunch is not even my hunch, if my analysis is correct, it's probably a fifth book on the way. Was it probably the death of America, or I don't know. Well, I don't want to be too morbid, but I'm gonna have the guest introduce himself more, and we're gonna dive into all this good stuff. So let's welcome Michael Anderson.
Nice to be here, Elias. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, not a problem. So, what do you want the listeners slash viewers to know about you in general?
Well, let me start with my personality a little bit because I think it's important for people to understand where I'm coming from. Because when you have a guest on a show, you don't, and they start talking about their books or their articles or something, you have to kind of figure that out. But I'll tell you ahead of time. So, I have an undergraduate engineering degree, and I got a PhD in computer science. So I built a 40-year IT career, basically. But the reason that's relevant to our conversation is that I have an engineer's kind of mindset. So I look at problems as things that need to be fixed, and you design a solution to fix the problem like an engineer designs something. So I do not like wasted money, for example, or wasted effort. Like when the government puts a program in that doesn't work, that doesn't please me because it doesn't achieve the objectives that were set for it. So I am a conservative genetically, but I'm not. I'm a moderate in terms of politics because I'm anti ideology. I think ideologies are dangerous on both sides because you put yourself in a box. And once you're in the ideological box, your free thinking goes away because now you're thinking in the box. You're in an echo chamber. So I try and stay out of that. I won't be ranting or raving because I'm trying to take an objective, logical view of politics in an effort to explain to the people that read my books what's going on in America. And I started writing books because I'm academically trained, obviously, but I felt like there was nobody communicating the analysis of politics to the American people. They're only communicating it to other academics, which doesn't help. So I try to take my books down a level. They're not written for academics. They're written to explain politics to people. So that's sort of the overarching goal of my books. And I've been writing for 20 years now. I started in the early 2000s. I'm a creative person and always liked history. So I started reading and writing about history. And then I started a blog on ancient history, which is still going. But then I got involved in political systems because if you read ancient history, you read about Rome and Greece and Athens and all that, and you start thinking about, well, how is that like what we have today? And my blog has a caption at the top of it that says, history has already happened, which I believe is true. Human nature hasn't changed in 2,000 years. There hasn't been enough time for it to change. So you can look back in history and see the same behaviors you see today. The technology is different and lifestyles are different and all that, but behavior is not different. And so I got started on this topic because I read Jonathan Haidt's book, The Righteous Mind. And I don't know if you ever heard of that, but it was published in 2012. Haidt is a social psychologist at NYU, and he was the first one to write about political morality. In other words, identifying and documenting the difference between the left and right. And I always used to wonder myself, as I'm sure everybody does, why is the left and right so different? Why do they argue? Why do they not accept the other point of view and all that? And Haidt laid that all out, basically. We have behavioral traits that are politically oriented. And because they're politically oriented, that pushes us into the right or left as part of our personality. And those traits actually go back to the time of primitive man, and I won't get into that unless you're interested, but they go way back because having a human society that has different points of views is beneficial for adaptation. If everybody had the same point of view, there would be a risk that the tribe could survive. So you have different point of views, different inputs, and consensus then can lead in the right direction. So I wrote my first book and I called it The Progressive Gene, which is basically the genetic analysis of the left. And it's mostly about two things: the progressive era, which is the most important thing that progressives ever did for our country, because starting in about 1880, they fixed a lot that was wrong with our society. They attacked corruption. They attacked unfair treatment because of the Industrial Revolution. People were exploited, mistreated, and all that. And they helped introduce rights to our society that didn't exist before. So that's their great contribution. However, since the New Deal era, they have been pushing for much more, the welfare state, and the left is a very big tent. I'm sure you know that it has communists in it, socialists in it, progressives in it. And so you can't call the left something that stands for everybody. And as a matter of fact, and I'll say this about the left and right, there's about 8 million people on the extreme left and extreme right. Not very many. And it's a shame that their megaphone is so large in our society that all we hear is those two sets of people instead of everybody in the middle. So that was the progressive gene. And then I was going to write a conservative gene, which was to talk about how the right thinks and behaves and all that. But I got waylaid in 2018 thinking about tribalism. So my second book was Tribalism, Curse of the 21st Century, which we'll get into more later. Then I wrote The Conservative Gene, published in 21. And then the fourth book was came out a few months ago, September 28th, Twilight of the American Experiment. Without moral balance, our republic will fall. Basically, what that book is about is that the left has too much influence over the higher education and the media because they control all that. So what people hear is more left stuff than right stuff. And I'm calling that out and saying it needs to be more balanced because people can't make objective decisions only looking at one side. So that's basically what that book is about.
Okay, yep. Oh, I'm sure you've heard a lot. Don't worry, your brain may act overwhelmed. It may feel like a throbbing. But listen, we don't get started, especially with tribalism, and we definitely going to touch a little bit if it's too late to save America, which is probably a little indirect, or probably a taste, if you will, of that Twilight book. And then, of course, we're going to think about the genetics of both sides of the aisle because I'm very interested in that as well. Because I think most let's just be very clear. Political scientists are not going to touch that area almost at all, maybe except for one moron that did, and I wasn't convinced by that study. I think they were smart to stay in their own lane because, look, yeah, y'all can barely analyze politics correctly. Don't try to get into the hard sciences where you need truth and validity and test hypothesis and all of that. You stick to analyzing the human kookiness and craziness. Which is more what which actually is more suited for a psychiatrist. But before I start bashing them, let's just start with the American tribalism. I think I like to start with the problem. What caused the modern American tribalism? Let's start from there.
Well, there's a very long list of causes that we probably shouldn't step through because we would bore the audience. There are many things like societal changes, for example, advancement in technology. I mean, cell phones, games, and TikTok and all that. The change in the family, the change in community behavior. People are in less organizations than they used to be in. People are less religious than they used to be. And I have a concept I write about that's called moral capital. And let me talk about that for a second. Moral capital is the glue that holds a society together, and it has four components: the family, the local community, your neighbors and coworkers, your moral community, which is typically your church. Doesn't have to be a church. It can be whatever religion type that you follow. And the fourth is patriotism. And our country was built on family and community and church, basically. And patriotism came along much later because we had to be united as a country. We had to have all our settling done and be attacked from outside and have the rest of the world against us to develop patriotism, but we had that too. So these four things are important. Obviously, family and community are innate in human beings and have existed since they came to walk the earth because we're social animals. So when any of these or all of these this moral capital gets disrupted, it disrupts society. So, when families are broken up, it's a problem. When communities don't talk, it's a problem. When people stop going to church and lose their religion, these are problems. So those are, that's part of the list of things that have caused the problem. Also, a big thing is the efforts on the left to push the progressive ideology. The right does not have an ideology and never has. The right's ideology is tradition and status quo. So the right resists too much change too quickly, and they serve the valuable service they provide in doing that. Because if the left had it their way, they would press down the accelerator and off we'd go. They want the climate fixed by 2030, whatever. And you can't do it that fast. You have to do it at a pace that's possible, basically getting to a point where when gasoline is more expensive than something else, everybody will do the something else, obviously. So the left has an agenda that it pushes hard. The right objects to that agenda, partly because it attacks moral capital and partly because they believe in tradition. They don't believe the statues should all get torn down. Or society having such large changes that it's intolerable, so they fight back. And people who people who don't know where they fit in fall into a tribe that represents their ideas, obviously. And unfortunately for some, being in a tribe is an escape from thinking. Because if I'm in my tribe, well, I'm all set. I don't have to read about the other tribe. I don't have to watch the news because I know what's correct, and everything that's not in my tribe is incorrect.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. No, I'm sorry. That supports that echo chamber. Oh yeah, I knew I'm right. Giving such steroid enhancement to that confirmation bias.
And there's psychological stuff involved here too, which you've alluded to. If I'm in a tribe and I think it's the right place for me to be, I should be proud of that because I'm better than everybody in the other tribe. So there's that thing in operation too.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just feel like I have to chime in with that one. That's. I'll be getting this, listeners, because this is I'm sure, look, we're not going to get to every single thing there, but this is a tip of the iceberg why we are so divided. But I think you listen to them very, very well. And the hope and that should be enough for them to digest the decadence of family, community, church, and even the fourth one I was at later on, patriotism. And yeah, and yep, and it's true, is the left have their way that we would have been all electric, all green energy already, and it would have been ultra expensive. And that's why sometimes I appreciate the right push it back to some extent. I said, no, I think we should transition, but we gotta make it to a point that's feasible as a true viable alternative and fiscally sound. So everybody could jump in that bear wagon more organically. So they're just shoving out faces. Oh, we're gonna do this. You either keep it with us or you be blown behind and you be called all kinds of names. They throw a boomer in there or dinosaur, anything just to call you. There's a slang, just this you that, not this, well, this more for the younger audience, or insult that you're, outdated.
I
So
think it's important to talk about the personality traits a little bit because that helps explain the left. Basically, the difference in the personalities of the left and right are the left is absolutely obsessed with equality. I mean, that's in their genetics. And they believe that a egalitarian society is optimal for human beings. And that well, first of all, they don't like capitalism because capitalism acts Darwinian. There are winners and losers in capitalism, and that's not fair. So they were anti-capitalism to the max. But the equality thing is huge and dominant in what they in their behavior because they do not accept the fact that life is not fair. Basically, on the right, conservatives actually prefer a hierarchical society because they believe that's the natural way for humans to live. Some people are smarter and better salesmen and better fighters or something, and they rise to the top. And anybody could, if given their own devices, make something out of themselves. And if they try, we're behind you. So that's there's this ideology thing about equality versus hierarchy, and that's big because you see everything in the left that they're doing is about equality. Like, let's not use bail because if we use bail, it's unfair to one particular group. So if we eliminate bail, it won't be unfair to that group. Meanwhile, there's no law and order. So, I mean, that's what convinces me that there's, emotional irrationality behind some of this because when the outcome of your belief system is bad, you have to question the belief system, right?
yeah, just to summarize the listeners up, left is obsessed with equality, or someone use equity. And then of course the right, they have a hierarchical pro-capitalist mindset. Hey, there's winners or losers. So well, find something you're good at. You probably get behind you if it's viable. There's a
Now,
rich, there's a poor, there's a have, the have-nots. They accept that reality.
now the other thing, and let me delve into the right a little bit. The right, I talked about the equality being drives the left. The right has a more complex set of behaviors that include loyalty. They're very loyal. They respect authority, because they believe that hierarchy makes sense, and they believe in sanctity, which is a term Jonathan Haidt uses to represent, for example, being religious. So they and traditions, they sanctify traditions because they believe there are things in life that you should value because of what they are, basically. So it's not that the conservatives don't believe in equality. They believe that people should be given equal opportunity, but they don't have the passion that the left does, but they have these other things to replace it. So that's why they're different.
I mean, just like you said, they truly value tradition, things, as they were, especially with family, the church, of course, being more nationalistic and more pride in their country, as opposed to left. Left is, they want equal, they want equality across the board, even the outcome, which I think separates left and the right, the
Yep.
outcome portion of
Yep.
it.
And another thing is the left is very aggressive, as you know. They would like to force their belief system on the whole country. They would like to run the economy. And I don't know if you know this, but during the New Deal, the Roosevelt administration attempted to do that. They passed the industrial, I forget what the term, the Industrial Act, and I don't remember that there was another part of it. That basically they were going to control every corporation in the country and tell them what their profit should be and what they would pay their workers. And that lasted 1 year, and the Supreme Court vetoed it. So, I mean, but that's just an example. I mean, people on the left think they're right, and they think because they're right, they should run things. Whereas people on the right don't want to run things. They just want to live their lives. I want to go to work, come home, get my paycheck, raise my family, play tennis on the weekend or whatever. They're not combative the way the left is. So that unfortunately hurts the right, because they often put up with abuse and never respond to it. So then the public, they're accused of something and they don't respond. So then the public thinks, well, are they really like that? Because they didn't fight back. But it's not natural for them to fight back. So that's why they don't.
Yeah, maybe except for where it comes to gun rights. That's when someone starts saying, oh, you're not taking away my guns.
Right.
I mean, you have to really push them just to really start getting a fight in them. Of course.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of examples. The ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment, that was passed by Congress in 1973, but then never achieved the 38 state a majority to make it an amendment, was stopped by religious conservatives, basically, who convinced most of the women in the country that that isn't all it claims to be. For example, if you have to do everything a man has to do, you could be in combat. I mean, there were some reasons why it didn't make sense, and so that's why it didn't pass. The other thing is Roe v. Wade, obviously. Fighting against that for all this time. I mean, the abortion issue is highly controversial because it's basically 50% on either side. There's a very narrow majority one way or the other that favors one or the other. Unfortunately, this is a case where consensus would be great, but there is no consensus, because I think most people on the right would say abortion is okay up to a certain point. And maybe the deeply religious people wouldn't say that, wouldn't agree to any, but there's certainly a lot of practical conservatives or moderates that would say that's reasonable. Whereas on the left, they want to push total term abortion. They want to have, there's some people, well, if you're going to allow it all the way, which is, too far.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, as you said, abortion is still a very, very trending issue, is one of the top issues. I think the third most important issue, according to a poll. And of course, this is very preliminary. We're just at the beginning of 2024. I mean, we just started February during this recording. Right. So that has a chance to be changed. But of course, nothing is more important than of course, economy and immigration. They're hotter topics, but I'm not gonna get too deep into that unless you want to integrate it to your talk, which is fine with me. Because there are left and the right, they look at these issues very differently. Left, they want just about everybody just to come in, while the right is no, we got to put the border wall and we got to vet these people. We got to let only certain people in. So that's right. A big fight on Congress right now, and it's a big mess. Just to put it very succinct, it's a mess.
Another interesting thing is this red state, blue state thing, which came out of COVID, because first of all, I was thinking, I wrote the tribalism book in 19, and the last chapter is how do we fix this, basically. And I thought and actually one of my reasons how it could be fixed would be if there were an outside agent that threatened the whole country, like let's say Pearl Harbor. And we don't want a Pearl Harbor, but if that happened, we would unite instantly in 1 week or something. And then when COVID came, I thought, this is it. We're going to be united. We've got an adversary that we're all going against. And it became political. And this whole thing about there's another left and right difference that comes in here, and that is that the left is much more interested in believes in science much more than the right. The right is, there are engineers and physicists on the right, but they're not skeptics about that, but they're more maybe objective about it, about science. Whereas the science is a religion to the left. And when the vaccine came out, then it was like, well, we gotta save everybody. This is the equality thing. And so we're going to shut everything down. And no one ever gave any thought to what the implications of that were. You stop the economy, you stop people from going to work, you don't let families out of the house, they can't go out to eat. Is that good? You don't send kids to school. And partway through, the conservatives kind of started to figure that out because they saw what damage was done, and that so they opened first and they had less of a problem than the left did. And so that got us into this red state, blue state thing because the blue states were the ones that did the crackdowns, the shutdowns, catastrophic shutdowns, and the red states didn't. So what happens after COVID? Now we morph into the conservative and liberal ideologies popping up in the states that are predominantly one or the other. So we're dividing into two countries, the red state country and the blue state country, which is crazy too.
Oh yeah, no, that's definitely bad for unity. And yeah, no, but to your point, yeah, you're absolutely on point in that. Yeah, the right, I think a lot of the states on average, just correct me if I'm wrong here, it was like 2 weeks after they start opening up. And then definitely for the blue states, when they started opening up, they started much later. They started months later on average, and they opened little by
Yeah.
little by little small increments. I mean, I'm in New York,
Except for
so
rich
I
people.
experienced that, and New York City was the last
Yeah.
start opening up. Of course, the rural counties, they were the first ones to open up, like deep upstate and all of them, because they're spread far apart and all that. And I'm gonna use just evolve analogies. And no. You don't go from 0 to 100. I'm paraphrasing the ex-governor Cuomo, but you just turn it little by little by little by little. And that's what he's one example of the blue states just finally open up. And of course, it took like about, I'll say, 6 months to a year, depending.
Well, and then all these lies come out. Masks don't work. 6 foot distance was made up. Get the shot and you won't get the disease. I have friends that are fully vaccinated and they've had COVID 2 or 3 times. It was all a conspiracy with big pharma to sell as many shots as they could. Kids don't need the shot. You're giving them for 2 to 5 year olds. They don't need it. You don't need a shot until you're about, I don't know what, 20 or something, where there's any risk at all.
Oh yeah, try tell that to the Democrats.
Right.
Oh yeah, you already know. You already know. You can fill in the blank. Ooh, try tell them that. I said, oh, you're endangering their lives. Their immunities developing, so they need it. We trying to jumpstart their immunity. I mean, they come up with all kind of says me. I'm not bashing left and right, but I'm just telling you what happened. They pushed the shot further. They pushed the shots first, and they mandated shots, especially the blue states, for you to keep your job, which
Yeah.
caused an uproar even among some residents in the blue states. I was, oh, I thought you was about freedom, all that other stuff. I said, no, it's not exactly. They're just trying to come up with the biggest, quickest thing. Just Big Pharma benefited a lot. Let's just say that they did benefit a lot. That's not conspiracy theory. That's a fact. They made billions of dollars.
Well, how about the fact that hundreds of healthcare workers, including doctors, were fired because they didn't get the shot? They haven't been hired back yet, I don't think, as far as I know. And healthcare personnel are in a shortage nationwide. There aren't enough.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I'm sure I only could speak for New York that they're slowly hiring some of those back. Of course, those that want the job, and some of them just move out of the state. Like
Yeah.
to heck with this.
Yeah. Yep.
You're not cursed. I'm going to match with you. To heck with this. I'm going to another state, which makes some states more redder and some states more bluer, which
Yeah.
create further divide, which is just intensifying. Is why things are getting worse. So it's okay. If I want more conservative values, I'm going to move to a state like Oklahoma, for example. Oh, but if I want liberal policies, I want, I enjoy liberalism. I'll go to California,
right?
especially the big city, San Francisco, Los Angeles. So, me, I'm being fair here. I love to bash both sides of the aisle. But before I do that, I do have questions for attacking both of them, of course. Because me, I think genetically I end up barely conservative, but overall my politics are very, very moderate as well, because I think both of them are kind of crazy.
I have a website that I'll send you the link to. It's Jonathan Haidt maintains it. You can go there and take a test, and it will show you it basically rates you on equality, authority, loyalty, sanctity, and all. And you get a rating, and then it shows how you compare to people on the left and people on the right. So you can learn about yourself.
Oh, yeah, and I would definitely take that. I mean, I took a lot of them, a lot of the political quizzes, but they were just more for fun.
Yeah.
They didn't have like a strong backing like this one here. I'm gonna really take this one very seriously. I said BuzzFeed earlier because that's the one I don't take very seriously. I think it's garbage.
Yeah.
And that's been my position ever since. And of course, the left runs that. So no, I'm just bashing BuzzFeed. I'm not bashing everything. Sometimes New York Times got good articles, and some of them I just think they're a little off. But I'm not going to get into that.
That's another thing. Because I'm doing research, I'm seeking all points of view. So I have a New York Times subscription. I read it every day in the morning, and it's left leaning, but I don't care about that. I mean, I'm using it as a news source and a particular point of view. I also subscribe to a socialist magazine because I want to understand what they're thinking. So it's not just, I'm not trying to do research based on a narrow point of view. I'm trying to get it as wide as possible.
Oh no, of course. And if people pay attention to your book list, they should easily figure that out.
Right.
But sadly, not everybody operates with logic and reason. That's what some people think I'm the right. Sometimes I read logic and reason. Well, and of course, in religion, I actually agree with the right more than the left on. When it comes to technology, yeah, they'll think I'm a left. I'm more of a technological person than a farmer. Not that good with my hands. Conservatives tend to be more physical and manual, and traditional. So, when it comes to my day job, yeah, definitely, I'll definitely be identified with the left. I fit more the left wing stereotype. So I'm a mixed bag, but I definitely want to take that quiz. It probably will expose something that I'm not even aware of for sure.
I think one of the most unfortunate things about tribalism is the attack of the left on religious people on the right. Because, as I said, religion is part of moral capital and it's very important to a lot of people. And the basic position on the left is if you believe in the Bible, then you believe Adam, the man was created 4,000 years ago, and that's impossible. So you're dumb. That's basically the theory. So, and that's not, I mean, you talk about religious ideology, it's an emotional connection that people have with their religion. So directly attacking it like that is unfair. You might say, well, they have a different point of view than I do, but they're entitled to their own beliefs. So I'm going to leave them alone, which is what they should do. So,
Oh no, I agree with that. Yeah, when it comes to religion, I really attack the left with that, and to point out the hypocrisy. They got to cater to the DEI. You might have a couple of Muslims, Hindus, all the other religions. You bad. They might not care about Christian that much, but if you keep bashing religion, I mean, Islam's not tolerating that much, and well, they won't dare touch that one based on what I found, unless there's a few of them that's crazy enough to do so. And
yeah, let me talk about that for a second
yeah, go
because,
ahead.
and I've written about this in my books. Socialism really started as a ideology maybe in 1820, 1830. They were organized socialist organizations in Europe. Every attempt to try to make socialism work failed, basically. In the cases we have in the modern age, we have China, Russia, North Korea, and Cuba. They're all authoritarian dictatorships. They're not socialist governments because at some point when you're transitioning to socialism, you become authoritarian. So it doesn't work. But the socialists basically gave up and realized the jig was up when they discovered that Chairman Mao had killed 60 million of his own people by starving them in 1959. And so the communists went to Maoism, and then that got rejected because of the hypocrisy. And then they decided, how to sell. They were trying to decide how to sell socialism to the West, and the strategy was to use identity politics as the vehicle, because if you can't have a revolution with a proletariat that is not unhappy, which is the case here, but you can use identity politics as a lever, and everybody has an identity, and so you can build a culture of victimhood and divide the world into the advantaged and disadvantaged. I forgot the word I was going to use, but
think I let me see, I can help you out here. The bourgeoisie versus the proletariat, the have nots.
right, have nots is a good analogy. I can't believe this slipped my mind. It's the it's privileged and underprivileged, but there's another word I'm forgetting. But the point is, if you're in a particular group, you're underprivileged, and if you're in everybody, it's basically white men are the group that's privileged, and they're the oppressor. Oh, oppressed and oppressors and oppressed is what I was trying to think of. So, and that makes strange bedfellows because, for example, a rich black man is still oppressed and a poor white man is still an oppressor. Because if you build an ideology based on that, then you're stuck with the results you get. But that doesn't make them think any more objectively about it. It is what it is.
Oh no, absolutely. Yeah, that's why I'm against that. I believe cases by cases they have a point, but if you're gonna have a broad stroke, which they of course they will do because they want to equalize everything in their mind. Yeah, no, it doesn't make sense. Yeah, I like that. I like that example because that's why I drill sometimes, and of course they may call me even right wing or even I was even called supremacist, even though I have plenty of Latino and Indian in my DNA. I was okay.
That's another thing that Jonathan Haidt talked about in his book. The left basically looks at characteristics of people and puts all the people of that characteristic in a group. They're group thinkers. People on the right are individualist thinkers. They don't think about, it's like, well, is that he smart enough to do the job? Then that's all I care about. And I don't think they consciously think about the fact that, maybe 50 years ago it was different, but it's like, I don't want to interview any black candidates because there aren't any smart ones. Those days have changed. And so, but you can't, I talked about traps before, ideology traps, but if you're a minority and you're put in that box, you're stuck in that box because you're oppressed. So how do you define the fact that you had high grades and test scores in high school and you get to go to a great college? How did you do that? Because you were oppressed. So you can't get out of, as an individual, you can't get out of that box easily. Whereas on the right, there's no box.
Yep. I think we already touched a lot on what the liberals do wrong. Yeah, and let me just try to balance that out a little bit. What do the conservatives do wrong? I think we already touched on what the left does wrong.
Oh no, I'll beat them up pretty good for you. So, first of all, they don't have an ideology. So, and I don't know that they can be faulted for that, but that means that they don't have a particular worldview on how to move forward. There isn't a plan in their minds. Now, they're libertarians, they're conservatives, and libertarianism is a dialect of liberalism, a strange dialect. It has some strange characteristics like no foreign policy, but marijuana should be legalized. Things like that. To me, it's not practical, but if you talk to young kids like college age or just out, a lot of them will say they're libertarian because they don't want government intrusion, basically, which is part of that philosophy. And there was actually a period where the conservatives did have an ideology. William F. Buckley, who you may have heard of, was a famous conservative, and he was the founder and editor of the National Review. He was quite a political activist, and during the 60s, he brought together three groups of conservatives that formed an ideology, and those were the traditionalists, the libertarians, and some disaffected communists who had rejected communism as a philosophy. And so that carried the conservatives all the way through the Reagan years, got Reagan elected, but then they spun off into neoliberalism, or I'm sorry, neoconservatism, which caused the Iraq War, unfortunately, because neoconservatism is a very aggressive foreign policy approach. So the faults of the right would be, no strategy, basically. Their idea of tradition changes with the wind because traditions, people change and societies change. So what they may have considered taboo 20 years ago maybe is okay now. So, and they get with the program. So whatever. Go ahead.
Oh no,
Sorry.
no, no, no. I thought you finished. I say, yeah, I was thinking about that, yeah, because now more Republicans are accepting of homosexuality. Let's just throw that one for example.
Yeah, no
Because
question.
because if you would have said that 50 years ago, it's like, oh no, 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 no. A marriage is between a man and a woman. They would defend that to the death back then.
Right.
That's one example of that transition, just to support your point. Yeah, no, they eventually adopt. And and this is my analysis of the other thing was gonna be of the conservatives a bit is they're always one or two political trends behind, which gives naturally the left the advantage.
Yep.
Early voting, for example, they were against that. I was one of the moderates who said, no, you should support early voting because that gives a wider window for people who normally are too busy to work during election day to vote. And you never know how much more you're going to get.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you level the playing field? How about that? Which is what it would do.
Yeah. And I was called leftist. I mean, to their point, yeah, it kind of does even the playing field. And, you said that's their main theme, equality. Well, I'm just trying to promote access. That's my intent, but the results may, and I think participation has went up a bit, and to me that's a good thing because I'm just trying to open the playing field for workers. I'm sure, yeah, a lot of people in the right was against me on that one, and I didn't care. So no, I'm a pro early vote kind of person. I think more people need to vote, and yeah, that's when I have my issues with the right. And I said, I think you're crazy. Eventually, you're gonna adopt it, but the left is gonna monopolize it maybe for one or two election cycles. Essentially.
Here's another aspect of that. The left is a very much more, the first word that comes to mind is homogeneous, and I don't necessarily mean that, but even though they have a big tent with a lot of ideologies, they all behave the same. They're united. Whereas on the right, the conservatives fight with each other all the time. Like we got the conservative coalition in the House that's blocking everything because they're fanatics who believe that we've already spent too much money. And there's an argument for that. The debt is hellacious, but you got to run the government. So to stop the government cold based on ideology is a serious error. So they fight among themselves because they're factionalized, and that's unfortunate.
Yep. No, I mean, yep. To your point, that's on full display right now, and I predict, which is somewhat it was more bold last year. I predict the Dems could possibly take the House because of that dysfunction, and people are just so tired of Congress dysfunction. But I also predict that the Republicans are going to take probably 2 seats from the Senate. So we're going to have another lame duck government. And I think for the executive branch, as of now, it's anybody's game. Yeah, some polls are favoring Trump right now, but that could change.
Right, sure. That's way early.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that like divided government because then the government can't do anything and they can't hurt anybody. So
ironically, I think
that.
Conservatives, ironically, they're the ones that are big fans of that for sure. Yeah, to them, the left, they use a metric, they use government productivity metrics. Oh, they pass most laws. That's good for the left. That's very bad for the right, and vice versa. Oh, government has hardly passed anything. That's the left being discussed. The conservatives like, yep, because they ruined everything when they pass new laws.
Right.
So there are two very opposing metrics that they use. So it's very interesting. Me, I'm kind of more in the middle. I want only good laws to pass.
Yep.
Of course, let the dumb ones die. Like milk that got passed. That stupid bill that was bipartisan. So I don't care about bipartisan with milk. Ugh,
Right.
but bipartisan doesn't work all the time. Yeah, the whole yeah, it's funny how they have that metric, and I laugh. Yeah, I think that's why the Republicans, they're very comfortable with this unproductive Congress. Less new laws to deal with, the better. Despite respecting authority.
Well, the other thing is, and you know this, a lot of these laws get passed with no enforcement. Like this giveaway for people that are laid off. I don't know how many was 80 billion or something like that. And the theft has been enormous. The embezzlement, where people made up companies that didn't exist and got hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think it was 18 million and was embezzled in California alone. And because they always leave. I mean, I always talk about programmers write a program, then they never document it, which is a slam on all programmers and technology. In the case of Congress, they pass laws, but they don't add the enforcement to it. Oh, we're happy. We got the law. We got all the wording done. Let's pass it. Okay, here we go. Oh, how are we going to make sure the money isn't wasted?
To the left wing's point, and make it more balanced, some of them do think of enforcement mechanisms
Yes.
to make sure to their point. Yeah, 'cause I feel like I was bashing them a bit much. I want to make sure I maintain political ideology ambiguity, especially my picture right here, left or right. So
Right.
that's,
Yeah.
that's the thing. That's a theme I've been trying to go with, especially for listeners who just paying attention to audio. There's a background picture with a nice little brown journal with gray stencil letters, left or right with a question mark. So I'm trying to maintain political identity ambiguity. That's my theme for this particular episode.
I'm
But
not bashing the right. Or left. I'm criticizing the left for their behavior. I criticize the right for their behavior. And because of these behavioral differences between the two, this is what we got. This is human behavior. So you're not going to change liberals into conservatives and vice versa. I mean, I think I've had the data. I think 60% of children who are raised in one or the other environment, liberal or conservative, end up being that political ideology, and part of it is genetic. If you got two conservative parents, you're probably going to be genetically conservative. So you can't change it. It's the way it is. They got to learn to work together and reach a consensus.
yep, that's exactly right. And yep. Well, even though me, I have a little wacky idea to open the floodgates for the third or fourth parties, but that's not happening anytime soon.
Well, that'd be nice because the interest in third parties is great right now because and it's psychologically obvious. When the people are unhappy with the parties they have, they want another one but our system is rigged against third parties.
Oh,
It's extremely
absolutely.
difficult to get. I mean, first of all, you don't get any funding because there's no party to fund you or no, PACs or anything. And then you've got to register in all the states and all that and do all that, spend all that money that you don't have. So it's rigged between the two parties to keep it the way it is.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you want to talk about bipartisan gang up? They will attack the third party, both of them, and then they'll be, of course, dismantled because people
Now,
just do two parties.
this year's going to be very interesting because of Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Yep.
because he's running 15 to 20%, which is bigger than any third party candidate, I think, in 50 years or more. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I think that's bigger than even Ross Perot, which that was.
Yeah. I think he got 10 million votes, but I don't remember what percent that was, maybe 2 or 3% or so. I don't
Yeah,
remember.
that's the
Yeah.
average. I remember like
Yeah.
three. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yep. So yeah, I think Robert F. Kennedy make it interesting. And then the other one I like to add, I think this is more coming up, the no labels.
Yeah.
Getting ballot access to at least 13 or 14 states the last time I checked. And they're trying to promote a so-called unity ticket. So far, it seemed like moderate corporate people, and that's a moderate wing that I'm not that much of a big fan of personally. Rumor's been Joe Manchin. The rumor's been John Huntsman. There are people involved from both sides that they're pretty disaffected with politics.
Yep.
So,
But it would be good if it's a good safety valve if we could have third parties that were viable and they could get money, then we could accomplish something because the American people would state their case by voting for that candidate, and the other parties would see what that candidate stands for. And usually, when that happens, they adopt the philosophy of the third party candidate because to be competitive. So, but we can't do it.
oh yeah, no, even though Libertarian is the largest third party in the country, how many of them have actually won office?
Yeah.
Think what? Yep, I think it's still zero, and they're just like a subset of the within the Republican Party. If they want to call that success, I won't call it that. Like who's the most libertarian in the Republican Party was in the Senate?
Rand Paul.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Rand Paul. Yeah, that's the closest libertarian that you're gonna get for at least for a long time. And
It's interesting that in California, they've elected two socialists. There's a socialist in the state legislature, and the mayor of Oakland is a socialist. And that's going to make for some interesting politics because they're competing against the Democrats. So it's interesting that the party is competing with itself.
Yeah, I think that's what happens when you have a very solid red and
Yeah,
blue state. Yeah, it's not about, oh no, forget about Democrat versus Republican. It's about which flavor you want. You want extra left or you want plain left at this
right,
point.
exactly. Yeah.
Of course, you apply that to the right. You want moderate right or you want very right? State like Idaho, for example, will just have, okay, you want moderate right or very right. That's what the fighting is at. It's not as longer D versus R. It's just the flavors, if you will, within the tent, debating among each other. In New York City, a great example, 90% of it is by Democrats. You have a fight between the moderate and the progressives.
Yeah.
That's what a big fight is at. Not Republican. Republicans are so minor that even the registered independents outnumbered them by
Right.
10,000. Yeah, so I'm partially the cause of that. Outnumbering Republicans in New York.
The
Yeah.
elites on the coast don't care about us.
Well, I'm obviously not part of that elite, but sadly, I do live kind of near them.
Right.
So I'm gonna be lumped in with them, just based on geography.
No, no, I'm not doing that to you. I'm just saying.
At least give me that pass. I'm not. I am definitely not with the least. I don't like a lot of their interesting ideas. I do like the fact that they promote art, but when it
Yeah.
comes to things, certain ideologies, like nah, I'm not for that. I'm for this. I'm not for that. I mean, I believe in climate change, but how we go about it, I think businesses will do better, as opposed to government.
Yeah.
And that's where I stand.
Businesses do better at anything than government because of the bureaucracy. And businesses have to make money. So they're not going to invest in things that don't work. That's why it surprised me that the big three committed to 100% electric vehicles like they did, particularly GM. And now they got to back off because nobody wants to buy them. 4% of Americans want their next car to be an EV.
Yeah, talk about a huge demand being tone deaf and they're
Yeah.
very irrational. Yeah, I'm like I said, I don't mind electric vehicles, just gotta be gradual, and yeah, this is just the left going 3,000 miles per hour trying to shove the society, and we're already putting so much brakes and traps that's falling apart.
Well, hybrids are flying off the lots. That's what people want because they're getting a partial electric car, but they don't have to try and find a charger.
Yeah, and chargers don't work during the cold weather. A few articles
Yeah.
point that out. So look, as much as I'm for open energy market, old energy, clean energy, whatever, and I'm open market kind of person. But we got listen, yeah, just trying to shove new things down in society is not the right way. I think it should just be more gradual, slow, test it out, and then of course expand from there if it works out.
Yep.
But I am just a humble man on the mic. So that's all I can say about that. As much as I'm into innovation and new ideas, I think that makes me kind of a left on that sense. But yeah, now comes some policies like communism. No, not even socialism because socialism is the next door of communism. Slippery slope.
So you need to ask me the big question. That is big question in our whole talk. You know what it is?
What is I
How are
am?
we going to fix tribalism?
Oh, of course, I do have that question, but I'm just so derailed on that. And then, of course, I have one more question after that. Yeah, how can it? Or let me add a little cynical flair. Is it too
Okay.
late?
Huh?
Or is it too late to fix it?
I don't think so. We've had tribalism twice before in the United States. We had the Civil War, which obviously is tribal, but we had the period during the Gilded Age where there was tribalism. And basically, I could recommend a book if you're interested in reading about it. What happened was when the war ended and the Civil War ended and the uh, country came back together, people got all excited about voting. And so voting, there was like 80% voting. But that in a few years turned into machine politics because every city had a machine boss for each party who used bribes and threats and all that stuff to get people to vote a certain way. It got corrupted, basically, which is what partly what the progressives cleaned up. But during that age, it was, if you walked in the polling place to vote Republican and there were some Democrats standing outside, you might get beat up or worse. So it was very tribal for different reasons. Tribal, it was really money and privilege and all that stuff because the bosses fed money to the elected officials who gave them patronage. And I mean, it was just a big money thing, but we were still tribal. And it took perhaps 15 to 20 years to get rid of it.
Oh no, I remember that. And then for my, I'm gonna act pretty local here. You remember Boss Tweed,
Yep.
anybody? A very
Yep.
big example in New York. Yeah, but he's talking about that portion of history. You
How
talking
about
about,
the Gangs of New York, the movie? You
yeah,
seen it?
I have to rewatch it for some reason. My brain's drawing a blur. I don't even know what's up with me.
Scary movie.
Yeah. And if the way New York is going with the decadence, I won't be surprised. I could easily fall back to that. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna say about that. Yeah, I don't have much. Not at least right now. I don't see much hope. But as I'm sure God's gonna illuminate me when the time is right.
So I got to answer the question. You said, can we fix it? And I said yes. And we fix it. I already gave you one way is if we unite based on outside
Right, right.
threats.
They're probably like
The other two ways,
it's us or so I think they're gonna attack us cyberly. That's my prediction at least, and I'm sure that's gonna because both the left and the right, to their credit, they're pretty hostile against China. And that's been mostly consistent, except for I think when Chinese migrate here, that's when the left, the right kind of deviate from each other.
number two way is fatigue. You
Mhm.
know what zeitgeist means?
Zeitgeist. No, I cannot
It's
say.
it's a German word. It means the spirit of our times. And basically, what it represents is the fact that the cultural belief system changes about every 20 years. I mean, like you can look at the 60s and 70s as uh, cultural revolution, and then the 80s and 90s are money and investments and all that stuff. And then 2000, the first decade was basically wars and stuff, neocons going wild. And then neoliberalism, Obama was a neoliberalist. And so that's why Bernie Sanders got popular because the Democrat rejection of neoliberalism, et cetera. And now we're in a tribal state. So it could just, in 2030, people could move on. I'm not predicting that or expecting it, but it could happen. The one I think is most likely is a grassroots effort to get rid of it. People there are already a lot of groups organized like Braver Angels, for example, who get people from the right and left together to talk and realize that both sides are human beings. They're not ogres. So it's possible to have a political dialogue without fighting. I was going to mention this earlier and I forgot. It amazes me that tribalism has broken up families. That, I can't tell you how many people I know. Well, my brother doesn't come to Thanksgiving anymore because he's a Trump supporter or something. And back to my moral capital thing, to imagine that tribalism is stronger than a family is hard for me to believe. It's just unbelievable.
Oh, yeah, no, Absolutely. I think I mean me I could just speak personally, anecdotally, I've lost some friends of both the left and the right for calling out their nonsense and they didn't like what I had to hear. So look, I don't care about your feelings. I said you said that against the left, but I'm attacking right now the right. I use their own I flip their own quips, their own verbal weapons against them, and then and like that. And for the left, I attacked them and said, look, speaking this wokeness, you're gonna drive a lot of people away. Let people speak they want to speak, and yeah, I don't mind that. They probably weren't good people and good people for me anyways. They weren't real friends. So yeah,
So the reason I think consensus is the only answer is because it won't come down from the top because the elites want to keep it the way it is.
oh yeah, division increases their power.
Yeah,
Division multiplies their power.
divide and conquer.
Yep, divide and conquer. Exactly. Yep. And I was trying to sound a little mathematic right there, make it as a little scientific. But yep, divide and conquer. And it's, so far it's working, but I'm sure there's going to be a time I don't see it right now where that's going to have a big blowback when people, especially people start waking up, seeing the BS for what it is. So that should have been my last question, but I think you already touched on a little bit. I don't mind diving to the genetic part of it because I kind of pushed that up. How can genetics how can genetics predict if one is going to be left or in the right? What should one pay attention to when it comes to that based on your studies? I mean, how can you predict one could be left just through genetics and one is going to adopt the right wing belief?
Well, you're not going to know that. I mean, if a child's born and you look at his parents' political philosophy, it's probably, and they're both conservatives, the kid's probably going to be conservative because 50% of your moral or political morality is genetic. The other half is environmentally influenced, obviously, like anything. So, from a prediction standpoint, I don't think you can predict it unless analyze the parents. Maybe you don't know until the child's born. And like I said, 40% of children grow up and switch parties. So it's not a 100% thing where you keep the party of your parents.
Oh no, yeah, absolutely. There, of course, let me just go. All right, so it's going to be obviously hard to predict if let's just say if the father was a conservative and the wife is a liberal. That's
Yeah.
going to be even much harder.
Yep.
And of course, if you have two liberal parents, more likely your child's going to be liberal, unless some reason they were raised in a conservative neighborhood. You probably switch to conservative, or vice versa. Two conservative parents, college influences kids' political thinking. The kid ends up left despite being born of two conservative
Now
parents.
you know the deal about parents don't have much influence on their kids, right? I mean, that's been
Oh,
proven. I mean, basically the most important things that parents do for their kids is protect them, help them grow up, feed them, and all that kind of stuff, and then help finance their future. That's it. I mean, the kid ends up with a personality that's a combination of genetics, his friends, associates, fellow students, and environment. That's it. It ain't the parents. As much as parents would hate to hear that, it's really the truth.
yeah. Sadly, that's a conclusion I eventually came up with. Yep. So sadly, no genetic marker is gonna 100% predict the human's political orientation. That's the whole point. You already said there's environmental factors, social factors that play a big role into that. And
Well, you know how they prove that. Have you ever heard of the twin studies?
yeah, I've heard of twin studies.
Okay. But I mean, they're interesting because they took twins who were orphaned and they followed them. They didn't make this happen, but they were adopted into different families. And when they got together later, they had the same personality, but it was very different than either of the adopting families. They weren't anything like them because the genetics was there and set.
Yeah, I mean, genetics is only one part of the puzzle, right? That'd
Yeah.
be clear. It's not the be all end all. I mean, that's my answer. I was trying to dig something different, but this is why I gotta say common sense, common analysis prevails, whether we like it or not in the
Right.
situation. So genetics is only just one piece of the puzzle. Nature versus nurture, social, Life experience, I'm sure, even plays a big role.
Yep.
You know, it could be tragedy, successes, what have you. Yep. So there's so sadly, I got nothing innovative here. But that's okay. I don't always need a innovative or a breakthrough kind of answer. Sometimes we need to just get back to the grounded reality that genetic does not, okay, this person has a more developed amygdala. Okay, this person's gonna end up in the right. Nah.
Well, see, they don't. I mean, you're mentioning what I wrote in my third book about the MRI studies that were done, and the right has a larger amygdala than people on the left on average, and the left has a more developed part of the brain that's involved with complex decision making. So the left they love to make decisions and figure it out and they're more analytical than the right. They can't say whether their brains are different because of their political beliefs or their political beliefs are different because their brains. You don't know. Maybe the amygdala in the right people develops because they're right people somehow and it has nothing to do with it. But it's interesting and it really supports the theory that they're really different. There's differences between the two that are not just political philosophy that they developed.
Yeah, I think I might butcher this, and someone could feel free to correct me in the comment. There goes a common activity. I think it's called the anterior something on the left. I think it's somewhere in the middle of the brain that deals with very complex decisions, like
Yeah.
front to the middle. The anterior complex or
I
something.
think it's the anterior cruciate.
CA, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not a science major, so if I butcher it, just deal with it. You correct me. You can correct me and just get your ego up. Okay.
Right.
That's all I'm gonna say about that. I am more of a history kind of person. Ironically, I'm pretty decent at math, but when it comes to science, yeah, I'm average. Nothing special there. So just laying it out there. Don't expect me to get that one right. I'm not a scientist. If I was a scientist, if I get that wrong, yes, please feel free to bash me, roast me if you have you. I'm supposed to know that, but I am not, especially a neurosurgeon, neuroscientist. They should really know that stuff. Not me. I got too much stuff going on already. I deal with history, politics, policy, government,
Yeah.
AI. That's enough for me.
Your brain is full.
Yeah. Oh, and spirituality, philosophy. So yeah, it's pretty packed in there. I'm not sure I got room for one more thing. Just a I mean, dabble, yes, always got room to dabble. But in terms of specializing and becoming an expert or diving deep, yeah, it's probably just like one more room left. All right, enough talking about me. This is not about me here. So let's do the shameless plug-in. This has been a great conversation. I definitely learned some things, and some things, you can tell your host's brain is not. I'm like functioning at 60% here. But hey, not no one's going to be at there 100% all the time. Let's just be real. So he's an author. He is engineer, and I like when people use different disciplines as a study another thing. To me, it's just interesting. It really makes things very interesting. You're not a political scientist, which I kind of sometimes they bored me to death. Some of them. Yeah, you have engineering, logical thinking, which I find it actually quite fascinating. So yeah, this is why you was an easy choice for my lovely podcast. So
So
let's
are we doing this shameless advertising now?
yeah, of course.
Well,
I'm
it's
a
very
capitalist. I'm a proud capitalist here.
right. It's very easy. My website is mikeandersonsbooks.com. Anderson with an S, one word. And my books are all there. You can buy the books on that site. There are podcasts there and other materials regarding the writing I do. I have a blog, and you can reach the blog from my website also. So that's the place to go if you want to learn more about what I write about and think about.
Yep. No, absolutely. Yep. Get those books, especially if you're interested in tribalism and the American experiment. Will it fall? He's optimistic more than I am, to be quite frank. I need to absorb some optimism. I mean, I am a Christian. I should be more optimistic, but that's something I think the Lord is gonna mold me eventually.
I think I'm genetically optimistic. I've just been that way my whole life. I assumed that I'm a glass half full guy. So
Yeah, it's been a struggle for me. I'm either a realist. I mean, I'm only optimistic when it's convenient, and then of course, when I get a bad result, I'm down to negative. So don't listen to me when it comes to staying optimistic. That's why I have guests that talk
Well,
to
you're
me.
when you if you read my fifth book, you're going to be more relaxed about our situation.
Yep.
The title of the fifth book is America's Counterfeit Democracy. And basically, what it's about is that there's a power elite group that controls everything, and the public doesn't have any say at all in what the country does.
We're kind of hit that conclusion already. But regardless, that's gonna be an interesting read. It's probably gonna put my confirmation bias on steroids in some of the issues.
But my point about stability is the power elite exists. These are the wealthiest and most politically connected families in the United States, and their wealth is enormous. If you add them up, they have like 60 or 70% of the total net worth in the whole country. And meanwhile, the bottom 50% has 2% or something. But it's in their interest because their goal in life is to increase their wealth and not have anything harm it. They're interested in societal stability. So they want our society to be stable and not be surprised by interruptions like the Great Recession, for example. Now, as a group, and both parties are in the power elite. It's not just one left or right. They can't handle a situation like Trump because Trump cannot be controlled. And so they're only interested in politicians they can control. Therefore, they don't want him winning again because of that.
And let me just represent the people who are anti-choice. Oh no, that's conspiracy theory. There's no such thing as a deep state and the elites. You're just saying that because he's a victim. He's a sore loser for 2020. I'm sure you heard all of that stuff already. Yeah, just to balance it out artificially. There is a lot of truth to actually what he's saying. So let me just put back on the serious hat, and that's why he's not liked by they've been well, those they got one label, the establishment. He calls them the swamp and all that other stuff. So, yep, it's actually true.
Well, of all the things I don't like about Trump, there are some things I do like, and I like the fact he's an outsider. He's essentially a third party candidate. I mean, he's a Republican because that position was open, but he wants to do things differently, and they should be. I mean, George Washington said we need to have a revolution here about every 100 years, and so we're 100 years or 200 years late. Should have had one in 1800 and 1900, well, in 2000, because any political system that goes long enough gets stale, obviously, because people permit it to get stale. So,
yep, no, absolutely. So I think he's fulfilling one of George Washington's many visions. I mean, and just to give him credit, one of my favorite presidents, he knew eventually slavery was going to end too.
yeah.
He was that. He was ahead of that. I call head of that issue.
Well, the Constitutional Convention, the North, all the representatives in the North wanted to stop slavery then, but they couldn't get the southern states to vote for the Constitution, so they had to compromise. There was no other choice. And it wasn't, ironically, when you think about it, it wasn't the slaves that were the issue with the South. Taking slavery away destroyed their economy. Their whole economy was based on that. So that was the issue to them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's always about the money and economy.
Yep.
You always gotta go back to that. Look, we all know slavery is wrong, but at that time that was their only way, their primary way of generating a GDP against the economy. So, I love it when, especially when, I hear this from the left more, how they use 21st century morality to judge people in the 17th, 18th century. That's very unfair.
I hate that, because what they should do is celebrate the fact that the questionable things we did in the past, we got enlightened and we got rid of the things that shouldn't have been. That's what you have to celebrate. We're not like that anymore. Not that all this stuff was done then, and it reflects on the people that live now.
No, yeah, no, exactly. And taking down, statues, especially some of them were, look, no historical figure is perfect, okay? And just using that one blemish just to justify excuses to take down statues. No, my proposal would be just put them in the museum so we could at least remember. This is a more how not to be in the 21st century or now.
Exactly.
So that's would have been my proposal. Thou kept the tradition preserved while moving the statue somewhere else. And so just taking them down, because communist nations, anarchist nations do that kind of stuff. So they can forget history, and then let of course the dictator or authoritarian just take over, because we forget history. Once we forget history, forget it. We're lost. We will be lost, and we will revert back to barbarity and absolute corruption.
And of course, the communists on the left love that, because the way you impose communism is you destroy all the traditions. Then there's nothing left, and you can start from scratch.
Yeah, no. No, totally against that one. Now I'm not going to show any ambiguity. Totally against that one. Yeah, that's what I'm going to say about that. I mean, I could go on for a while. Normally the shameless plug-in is at the end, but that's fine. Switch things up. Keep my listeners and viewers guessing or scratching their heads. I'm totally fine with that. So, yep. I mean, we could go on for hours, obviously. All right, listeners, if you somehow survive all this, and I gotta do the usual YouTuber / Rumbler. Yes, on multiple platforms, just in case cancel culture comes and takes down YouTube. I have other platforms. Yes, I gotta think that way. I don't care if you call me paranoid or crazy, but I have to, because it has happened multiple times. If you think I'm crazy, I think you're crazier. Okay, so like, comment, subscribe, or follow for Rumblers. Subscribers for YouTubers, and follows Rumblers. That's fun you have. And share this if you find this worthy. Okay, if you're listening to this through Apple Podcasts, leave a review, hopefully 5 stars. And if not, just put a little reason why. Of course, the good and the bad. I'm just going to say the bad. I'm not going to be politically correct. That's all I'm going to say. All right, I'm ready to torture my guests here. I'm going to wrap this thing up. So from whenever you're listening to this podcast, you have a blessed day, afternoon, or night.